Three men stood at the edge of the street, identical in every way that mattered. Each of them 6 feet 7 inches tall, massive frames that seemed carved from granite rather than born from flesh. The same chestnut hair, the same amber eyes like whiskey held up to firelight. And all three of them staring at her with hunger so intense it felt physical, like she was something they had been waiting for, something they had been starving for. But before Magnolia understood what that hunger meant, before she knew the price of salvation, she had to run. Run from the man who called himself her guardian, but wanted to make her his possession. Run 2,000 miles into a wilderness that killed women in 4 ways: childbirth, disease, accidents, and violence. She thought she was escaping one cage. She had no idea she was choosing another. One with 3 locks, 3 keys, 3 identical men who would share everything, including her. But before we dive into Magnolia's impossible choice, comment below where you are watching from. I love hearing from viewers around the world. And if you enjoy these stories of love, survival, and the wild frontier where society's rules meant nothing, subscribe for new videos every week. Your support means everything. Now let us return to Magnolia, to the night she ran, to the moment everything changed. The snow had been falling since midnight. It fell without wind, straight down from a sky the color of old iron, each flake small and dry and patient. By 3 in the morning, Boston lay silent under its white shroud, the streets empty save for a single figure running through the darkness. Magnolia Hartwell ran like a woman with death at her heels, because she was. She wore only a navy traveling dress and thin cloak, inadequate against the December cold that bit through fabric and skin straight to bone. Her honey blonde hair had come loose from its pins, streaming behind her in wild waves. In her arms, she clutched a worn leather Bible and a small cloth purse containing $23, 6 months of patient theft, 1 coin at a time from the desk drawer of the man who called himself her guardian. The man who had promised that in 2 days on Christmas Eve, he would make her his wife in every sense of the word. Her breath came in white clouds, her lungs burning with each inhale. Behind her, Blackwell Manor sat dark and imposing on Beacon Hill, all its windows like blind eyes. She did not look back. Looking back meant hesitation, and hesitation meant capture. And capture meant a wedding night that would end with her body used and broken, just like Abigail Pierce and Constance Lowell before her. The convent appeared through the snow like salvation made of stone. Nola fell against the heavy wooden door. Nola fell against the heavy wooden door and pounded with fists that had gone numb, pounded until her knuckles split and bled dark spots into the snow at her feet. The door opened. A nun stood silhouetted against warm lamplight, her face creased with sleep and concern. Nola fell to her knees on the threshold. Sanctuary, she tried to say, but her throat had closed around the word. So she simply held out her bleeding hands and let the tears come silent and desperate. The tears of a woman who had finally run out of places to run. The nun, young and kind-faced, helped her inside, led her through corridors that smelled of beeswax and old incense, brought her to a room where an ancient woman sat beside a fire, rosary beads clicking through weathered fingers. Mother Vivienne Beauchamp was 82 years old. She had steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, sharp as broken glass set in a face mapped with lines that told stories of hard choices and harder mercies. She gestured for Nola to sit, said nothing, simply waited. So Nola told her story, all of it. Her voice cracked and faltered, but did not stop. She spoke of her father, Reverend Samuel Hartwell, who had taught her Latin and Greek and died believing his daughter would be cared for. Of her mother, Catherine, who had taught her dignity and died too soon to protect her. Of Cornelius Blackwell, deacon and merchant, who had seemed kind until the door closed and the mask came off. 2 years of imprisonment disguised as guardianship. 2 years of locked doors and controlled meals, and hands that grabbed and threatened, but never quite crossed the final line because Cornelius Blackwell was a patient man who preferred his victims willing. She told Mother Vivienne about the documents hidden in Blackwell's study, the death certificates of 2 previous wards, both young women, both dead within weeks of marrying him, both leaving him their inheritances. She told her about the night 3 days ago, when Cornelius had come to her room at midnight, whiskey-breathed and cold-eyed, and informed her that on Christmas Eve she would be becoming his wife, and he would finally claim what he had purchased. When she finished, the room was silent, except for the click of rosary beads and the snap of logs in the fire. Mother Vivienne studied her for a long moment, Then she reached out and took Nola's bleeding hands in her own. "You can stay here 3 months," the old woman said. Her voice was rough as tree bark, gentle as benediction. "After that, he will have legal grounds to retrieve you. The law gives guardians power until their wards reach 21, and you are still 20. Your birthday is not until March." Nola felt hope drain from her body like blood from a wound. 3 months was not enough. Cornelius would wait. He was good at waiting. He would come for her the day the law allowed, and this time there would be no escape. But Mother Vivian continued, and her eyes gleamed with something that might have been mischief or might have been grace. "I may have a solution. Tell me, child, how do you feel about mountains? 3 years ago, a man from the Colorado Territory delivered timber for our chapel repairs. He was a hard man, a frontier man, but honest. When I offered payment, he refused. Said the work was for God and needed no earthly compensation." Mother Vivian released Nola's hands and stood moving to a desk where she withdrew paper and pen. Her handwriting was cramped but elegant, the script of someone educated in an era when penmanship was prayer. "His name is Dalton Brennan. He lives in the high country with his 2 brothers. Identical triplets, all of them, though I only met Dalton. They have been alone on that mountain for 8 years now, since his wife died." She wrote quickly, not looking up. "They are good men in their way. Rough, yes. Unconventional, certainly. But I believe they will protect you, and protection is what you need most." "What do you want me to do?" Nola asked. "Survive," Mother Vivian said simply. "Go west. Become someone Cornelius Blackwell cannot reach." She sealed the letter with wax, pressed her ring into the soft red pool. Then she looked at Nola with ancient eyes that held no illusions about the world or its cruelties. "I am going to tell Dalton Brennan that I am sending him a young woman, my novice sister, who has fallen ill with consumption and needs mountain air to survive the winter. He will take you in as charity, as Christian duty." "But that is a lie," Nola whispered. "Yes," Mother Vivian agreed. "It is." She held out the sealed letter. "The question is whether you would rather die honest in Boston or live dishonest in Colorado. Choose quickly, child. Dawn is coming, and with it, discovery." Nola took the letter. Her hands had stopped shaking. The next morning, Mother Vivian purchased a train ticket with convent funds. She pressed it into Nola's palm, along with a small purse containing an additional $30 and a worn copy of the King James Bible. "This was your father's," she said. "I wrote to him years ago about church matters. He sent this in return with a note inside. I think perhaps he meant for you to have it one day." Nola opened the Bible. There on the inside cover, in her father's familiar script, "Magnolia, if you are reading this after I am gone, remember this: freedom is not the absence of bonds. Freedom is choosing which bonds to accept." She did not understand the words. Not then. But she held the Bible close as the train pulled away from Boston, as the city disappeared behind her in a cloud of steam and snow, as everything she had ever known became smaller and smaller until it vanished entirely. The journey west took 6 days. Boston to New York on Christmas Eve, the train car crowded with families and merchants, everyone bundled against cold that seeped through the windows in waves. Nola kept to herself in a corner seat, hat pulled low, watching the world transform outside the frost-covered glass. In New York, she changed trains. Spent an uncomfortable night in a boarding house near the station, jumping at every sound, certain Cornelius had somehow found her. But morning came without incident, and she boarded the westbound express that would carry her into the unknown. New York to Chicago took 2 days. The landscape flattened into endless winter plains, farmhouses squatting low against horizons that stretched forever. She shared a bench with an elderly woman named Lucinda Graves, a widow traveling to Denver to open a boarding house after her husband's death. "You are very young to be traveling alone," Lucinda observed. Her voice held no judgment, only curiosity worn smooth by years. "I am going to family." Nola lied. "In Colorado. They need help with the household." Lucinda studied her with eyes that had seen too much to be fooled. Then she smiled. "Family we choose is often better than family we are born to. I hope you find what you are looking for, child. Or better yet, I hope you find something you did not know you needed." The words stayed with Nola long after Lucinda disembarked in Omaha. Chicago to Denver took another 3 days. The train climbed slowly into thin air and thinner civilization. The passengers changed. Fewer suits and dresses, more buckskin and wool. Fewer soft hands, more scars and calluses. The men carried rifles as casually as Boston gentlemen carried walking sticks. The women had eyes like flint. Nola read her father's Bible and tried not to think about what waited at the end of the line. Denver was a city trying to pretend it was civilized. Brick buildings rose 3 and 4 stories high, but between them gaped vacant lots and tent camps. The streets were half paved, half mud. The air smelled of coal smoke and horse dung and something wild that came down from the mountains. Mother Vivian had arranged for Nola to spend one night at the Denver Sisters of Mercy Convent. A different building, same order, same commitment to sheltering the desperate. Sister Philippa met her at the door. She was 45, lean as a whip, with skin weathered by years of frontier sun before she had taken her vows. "So you are Mother Vivian's lost lamb, sister," Philippa said. She led Nola to a small room with a narrow bed and a window that looked west toward mountains that scraped the sky. "You know what you are walking into?" Nola shook her head. Sister Philippa sat on the edge of the bed. "I lived out there for 10 years before I came here. Buried 2 husbands and 3 children. The frontier kills women in 4 ways: childbirth, disease accidents, and violence. In that order." She looked at Nola with eyes that held no softness. "But the women who survive become something society does not have a name for. They run ranches. They set bones and deliver babies. Some of them even wear badges. The wilderness burns away everything weak, everything borrowed. What remains is pure." "True," Sister Philippa stood. "The question is not whether you will suffer, child. You will. The question is whether you will let that suffering destroy you or forge you into something harder than the men who think they own you." Nola slept poorly that night, dreaming of fire and ice and hands reaching for her through darkness. Morning came cold and clear. Sister Philippa walked her to the stagecoach depot, pressed a small bundle of dried herbs into her hands. "For bleeding, for fever, for pain," she said. "Learn to heal yourself. No one else will do it for you." The stagecoach was smaller than Nola had imagined. Barely large enough for 6 passengers and their luggage. 4 others were already seated when she climbed aboard. An old prospector with skin like tanned leather and eyes that had seen too much gold and too much death. He introduced himself as Ezekiel Porter, heading back to his claim after selling dust in Denver. A young married couple, Ambrose and Charity Whitmore, fresh-faced and eager, traveling to start a ranch near Pine Ridge. They held hands like drowning people clutching driftwood, and a man who made Nola's skin crawl the moment she saw him. He was perhaps 40, lean and weathered, dressed in buckskin that had been worn soft with use. His hair was dark streaked with gray. His eyes were pale, the color of winter ice. He held a rifle across his knees like it was part of his body. "Montgomery Thane," he said when she met his gaze. "Folks call me Monty." His voice was rough as gravel, and when he looked at her, really looked at her, Nola felt something predatory in his stare, like he was measuring her worth, calculating her weakness. Charity Whitmore noticed. She shifted in her seat, positioning herself between Nola and Monty, and gave the hunter a look that could have frozen whiskey. The stagecoach lurched into motion. Denver fell away behind them as they climbed into country that grew wilder with each mile. Pine forests thick enough to swallow armies. Valleys so deep the sun never reached their floors. Mountains that rose like the bones of God breaking through the earth. Nola kept her eyes on the window and tried to ignore the way Monty watched her, but she heard the Whitmores whispering when they thought she was sleeping. "That is Monty Thane," Ambrose murmured. "Lives up past Pine Ridge like a hermit. Story is he loved a woman once. She married someone else. Then she died in the snow. Suspicious circumstances." Charity shushed him, but not before Nola heard. Not before the words planted themselves like thorns in her mind. They reached Pine Ridge on the evening of December 30th, just as twilight bled the last color from the sky. The town was small, barely more than a main street, with buildings hunched against the cold. General store, church, saloon, boarding house. Perhaps 200 people lived here, scattered across the valley and up into the surrounding hills. The temperature had dropped below 0. Nola's breath made white clouds in the air, even inside the stagecoach. When the driver opened the door, the cold hit like a physical blow. She stepped down into snow that came up past her ankles. Her legs shook from the long ride. Her body ached in places she had not known could ache. And then she saw them. Three men stood at the edge of the street. Not men giants. Each of them had to be at least 6 feet 7 inches tall, maybe taller. They were identical in every way that mattered. The same massive framed shoulders so broad they seemed to block out what remained of the light. The same thick muscular builds that made them look carved from granite rather than born from flesh. The same tan skin weathered by years of outdoor labor. The same chestnut brown hair with sun-streaked highlights, medium length and naturally tousled. The same unusual eyes, a warm amber color like whiskey held up to firelight. But it was not just their size or their identical appearance that made Nola's heart skip. It was the intensity with which they looked at her. All three of them staring with focus so complete it felt physical, like she was something they had been waiting for, something they had been hungry for. The one in the middle wore no bandana. The one to his right wore burgundy red. The one to his left wore navy blue. That seemed to be the only way to tell them apart. Before anyone could speak, Monty Thane stepped down from the stagecoach. He looked at the three brothers, and something ugly twisted his weathered face. "Brennans," he said. The words sounded like an insult. "I heard you have a new guest coming." The middle brother, the one without a bandana, took a step forward. His voice was deep controlled, with a slight rasp that suggested he did not use it often. "Thane, walk away." "Now," Monty smiled, showing teeth. "Does she know?" He gestured toward Nola. "Does she know about Lorelai? About how you three shared her like property?" The brother in the red bandana moved faster than something his size should be able to move. One moment he stood still, the next his hand was fisted in Monty's buckskin shirt, lifting the smaller man onto his toes. "Say my wife's name again," he growled, "and I will break your jaw." Nola's mind caught on the words. "My wife, singular, not our wife, my wife." Monty laughed, a sound like broken glass. "Your wife, she was Dalton's wife. You and Beck were just scavengers picking at his leavings." The brother in the blue bandana grabbed the one in red, pulled him back before violence could escalate. "Easy, Rhett, he is not worth it." Monty straightened his shirt, still smiling. He looked at Nola one last time. "Good luck, miss. You are going to need it." Then he walked away into the gathering dark. The silence that followed felt enormous. Charity Whitmore whispered something to her husband, and Nola caught the words, "8 years ago, Christmas Eve found in the snow." The middle brother approached slowly. When he stopped in front of Nola, she had to tilt her head back to look at his face. He was even bigger up close. His hand, when he offered it, could have easily spanned her entire waist. "Miss Hartwell," his voice was deep, controlled. "I am Dalton Brennan." Nola placed her small hand in his massive one. His palm was warm despite the cold calloused from hard work, careful in the way that closes around her fingers, gentle despite the obvious strength. "Mr. Brennan, thank you for meeting me." His amber eyes searched her face. Up close, she could see they were not simply one color, but flecked with gold and brown, like autumn leaves in sunlight. There was intelligence in those eyes, weariness, and underneath it all, a hunger he was trying very hard to control. "Mother Superior did not mention I had 2 brothers. Mother Superior mentioned you needed somewhere safe." He released her hand. "We can provide that. The details can wait until we reach the cabin." The brother in the red bandana stepped forward. He was equally massive, equally intense. But where Dalton seemed controlled, this one seemed barely restrained. "Rhett Brennan, pleased to make your acquaintance, Miss Hartwell." The third brother, wearing the blue bandana, came to stand beside them. He had the same face, the same body, but his eyes held something gentler, or perhaps just better camouflaged. "Beckett Brennan. Most folks call me Beck. Welcome to Pine Ridge." Nola looked from one identical face to another and felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. 3 of them. Mother Vivian's letter had said nothing about brothers, had said nothing about whatever arrangement these men had shared with someone named Lorelai. "We need to go," Dalton said. "The cabin is 7 miles up the mountain and the temperature is dropping." Can you ride? Nola had ridden exactly twice in her life. But looking at these 3 massive men, at the intensity in their identical amber eyes, at the snow beginning to fall again, she understood she had reached a decision point. She could refuse, could demand they take her back to Denver on the next stage, could run back to the convent and beg for a different solution. Or she could trust, could take a leap into the unknown, could believe that these 3 massive, intimidating, strangely compelling men might be her salvation rather than her doom. "I can learn," she said. Something shifted in Dalton's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "Yes," he said softly. I believe you can. They helped her onto Lucy, a bay mare, who stood patiently while Nola arranged her skirts and found her seat. Beck tied her small carpet bag securely behind the saddle. Rhett made sure her feet were properly in the stirrups. Dalton mounted his own horse with easy grace and positioned himself beside her. "Stay close to me," he said. "The trail is steep in places. If you feel yourself slipping, call out. I will catch you." The ride up the mountain took 2 hours. The trail wound through dense pine forest where snow clung to every branch, creating a world of black and white. The air grew thinner, colder, until each breath burned Nola's lungs. Her thighs ached from gripping the horse. Her hands grew numb even inside her gloves. But she did not complain. She simply followed Dalton's broad back and tried not to think about how far from civilization they were traveling. Halfway up, Beck rode alongside her. "You are doing well," he said. "Most city women would be crying by now." "I am not most city women," Nola replied. He grinned. It transformed his face from intimidating to almost handsome. "No, I do not believe you are." When the cabin finally came into view, Nola's first thought was that it looked like something from a fairy tale. It sat in a clearing surrounded by towering pines built from dark weathered logs that seemed to grow from the mountain itself. Smoke rose from a stone chimney in a thin, steady line. Snow covered the pitched roof icicles, hanging from the eaves like crystal daggers. It was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way. Her second thought was that it was small. 2 stories, perhaps 3 rooms on each level for 4 people. Dalton dismounted and came to help her down. His hands spanned her waist completely as he lifted her from the saddle and set her gently on the ground. She swayed her legs unsteady after the long ride. He steadied her, those massive hands remaining on her waist longer than strictly necessary. "Welcome home," he said quietly. The word should have comforted her. Instead, it sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. They led her inside. The main room took up most of the first floor. A huge stone fireplace dominated one wall, its mouth large enough that a man could stand inside if he bent his head. A fire burned there now, casting golden light across rough wooden floors, covered here and there with woven rugs in muted reds and browns. A table stood near the window, with 3 chairs tucked beneath it. 3, not 4. A simple kitchen area occupied another corner, with a cast iron stove shelves holding dishes and supplies, a water bucket on a wooden counter. A bookshelf leaned against the far wall, its shelves holding perhaps 25 volumes with cracked spines. In the corner, barely visible in the firelight, hung a small cross carved from cedar wood, suspended by a thin strip of leather from a nail beside the window frame. The craftsmanship was exquisite, every line perfect. But what caught Nola's attention, what made her breath catch in her throat, was the doorway to the left and the name carved into the wooden beam above it: Lorelei. Dalton followed her gaze. His expression shuddered, became unreadable. "That was my wife's room," he said. "It has been empty for 8 years. We cleaned it for you. I hope you will be comfortable there." Before Nola could respond, Beck appeared with her bag. "Let me show you," he said gently. The room was small but adequate. A single narrow bed stood against one wall, its frame simple and sturdy, covered with a quilt in patterns of blue and gray. A dresser beside it held an oil lamp and a small mirror. A shelf on the wall still held glass jars filled with dried herbs, their contents long past any use. In the corner sat a wicker sewing basket, its lid closed, pale with dust. Everything in this room had belonged to Lorelei, and now it belonged to Nola. Beck set her bag on the bed. "We tried not to disturb her things too much, but if you want anything removed, just say so." Nola touched the quilt, feeling the careful stitches. "She made this?" "Yes." Beck's voice was soft with memory. Lorelei was good with her hands. Sewing, carving, growing things. She loved this place. Said it was the closest thing to heaven she would see on earth. "How did she die?" The question came out before Nola could stop it. Beck's expression darkened. "That is Dalton's story to tell. But I will say this, her death nearly destroyed us, all 3 of us. He left her alone then." Nola sat on the bed, still wearing her coat and gloves, and tried to process what was happening. She was in a cabin on a mountain 7 miles from the nearest town, with 3 men who looked identical, and who had all apparently loved the same woman. The woman whose room she now occupied, whose bed she would sleep in, whose ghost seemed to hover in every dust-covered corner. She heard them talking in the main room, voices low but audible through the thin wall. She is not what you said. You told us she was a sister, older. Plain. That is what Mother Vivian wrote. I did not know. She is beautiful, young, and she came all this way alone. We cannot send her back. I am not suggesting we send her back. I am saying we need to be honest about what we want. We will be. Tomorrow. Tonight, let her rest. Let her adjust. She has had a long journey. A pause. Then another voice quieter. Do you feel it? What I feel when I look at her, yes. We all do. Footsteps approached her door. Nola stood quickly smoothing her dress, trying to look composed. Dalton knocked softly. May I come in? Yes. He entered, ducking slightly to clear the door frame. In the small room, he seemed even more massive. There was barely space for both of them. I wanted to make sure you have everything you need. Fresh water in the pitcher chamber pot under the bed, extra blankets in the chest if you get cold. Thank you. Nola clasped her hands in front of her to keep them from shaking. Mr. Brennan, I think we should talk plainly. Mother Superior's letter. It was not entirely truthful, was it? His amber eyes met hers directly. No, I'm not a sister. I have never taken any vows. I assumed as much when I saw you. And I am not sick. My lungs are perfectly sound. Also assumed. Nola took a breath. So why did you agree to this? Why did you invite a stranger into your home based on a letter full of lies? Dalton was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. Because I am lonely. Because my brothers are lonely. Because we have lived in this cabin for 8 years with only each other for company, and the silence has become unbearable. He looked at her with those intense amber eyes. Because when Mother Vivian wrote that a woman needed help, I thought perhaps we could help each other. Help how? We need a wife, Miss Hartwell. He said the words that would change everything. All 3 of us. And unless I miss my guess, you need husbands. Or at least you need to be beyond the reach of whoever you are running from. The air in the small room suddenly felt too thin to breathe. 3 husbands, Nola whispered. Yes, that is impossible. Illegal. Immoral. It is how we live. His voice remained calm. It is how we loved Lorelei. It is how we would love you if you choose to stay. Nola's mind reeled. She thought of Cornelius Blackwell and his whiskey breath. She thought of Boston and its suffocating propriety. She thought of Mother Vivian's words. Survive. Go west. Become someone he cannot reach. I need time, she managed. I need to think. You have until tomorrow evening, Dalton said. We will explain everything then. What we expect, what we offer. You will have a choice, Miss Hartwell. You can accept and stay, or you can refuse, and we will take you back to Pine Ridge, give you money for passage wherever you want to go, and you will never see us again. He moved toward the door, then paused. But know this, if you stay, if you choose us, we will protect you. We will provide for you. We will share everything we have, including ourselves. You will never want for anything. And you will belong to all 3 of us, completely. He left before she could respond. Nola sat back down on Lorelei's bed and stared at Lorelei's sewing basket and Lorelei's herb jars and tried to imagine what choice she could possibly make that would not destroy her one way or another. Outside the small window, night was falling. The snow continued to fall with it, silent and patient, covering the world in white, erasing all the paths that had brought her here, leaving only the question of which path she would choose next. In the main room, she could hear the brothers moving around, the clink of dishes, the crackle of the fire, low voices discussing something she could not quite hear, and underneath it all, a tension, anticipation, like the whole cabin was holding its breath, waiting for her answer. Nola pressed her hand against the cold window glass and wondered if she had finally escaped one cage only to enter another. Or if perhaps, just perhaps, she had found something she did not even know existed. Freedom and surrender. Safety in the arms of 3 identical strangers who looked at her like she was water in a desert. Tomorrow they would explain everything. Tomorrow she would have to choose. But tonight she simply sat in the darkness and opened the sewing basket with trembling hands. Inside, beneath thread and needles and scraps of fabric, she found what she was looking for. A journal. Small, leather-bound, filled with cramped handwriting. Lorelei's diary. Nola knew she should not read it. It was private, intimate, meant only for its author's eyes. But her fingers moved without permission, opening to the first page. January 1st, 1862. Today, I married Dalton Brennan. I am the happiest woman alive. She turned pages scanning entries. Lorelai's love for the three brothers shone through every word. Her joy in this mountain life. Her certainty that she had found something rare and precious. But as Nola read further, a darker thread emerged. December 10th, 1869. Monty came again today. I told him to leave. He does not understand that I have made my choice. The brothers do not know he visits when they are away. I fear what he might do if I tell them. December 15th, 1869. Monty grabbed my arm today, said I was wasting myself on three men when I could have one who would give me everything. I pushed him away. I am frightened. Nola's hands shook as she turned to the final entry. December 23rd, 1869. Tomorrow is Christmas Eve. Dalton gave me a ring, a real wedding ring. Tonight we will have a private ceremony, just us four. But I saw Monty outside the window. His eyes, oh God, his eyes. I am afraid. The entry ended there, unfinished. Because the next day, Christmas Eve, Lorelai had walked into the snow and never come back. Nola closed the diary. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She looked at the window, the same window where Lorelai had seen Monty watching. And as if summoned by thought, a shadow moved in the darkness outside. A figure man-shaped standing at the edge of the clearing, watching the cabin, watching her window. Then it turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving only footprints in the fresh snow and the terrible certainty that whatever had killed Lorelai 8 years ago was not finished with the Brennan brothers yet. Morning came gray and cold. Nola woke to the sound of movement in the main room, the scrape of a stove door opening, the clink of a coffee pot being filled, the low murmur of voices, too quiet to distinguish words. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory flooded back and she sat up quickly, her heart pounding. She was in Lorelai's bed, in Lorelai's room, in a cabin with three identical brothers who wanted to share her the way they had shared their dead wife. The impossibility of it should have sent her running. Instead, she found herself listening to those sounds beyond her door, with something that felt dangerously close to curiosity. She dressed carefully in the same navy blue traveling dress, now wrinkled beyond repair. Her hair was a disaster, tangled from sleep and the long journey. She found a brush on the dresser, Lorelai's brush, and used it, feeling strange, touching something so intimate that had belonged to the dead woman. In the small mirror, her reflection looked pale, her blue eyes too large in her face, but her chin was lifted, determined. Whatever happened today, she would face it with dignity. When she opened her door, she found all three brothers in the main room. They had clearly been awake for hours. The fire burned high and hot. Coffee steamed in tin cups on the table. The smell of frying bacon filled the air, rich and savory, making her stomach clench with sudden hunger. Dalton stood at the stove cooking. Even from behind, she recognized him by the absence of a bandana. His broad back was covered by a flannel shirt that pulled tight across his shoulders, with every movement outlining the muscle beneath. Rhett sat at the table, whittling something from a piece of wood shavings falling to the floor around his boots. Beck stood by the window, looking out at the snow-covered world, a cup of coffee warming his hands. All three turned when they heard her door open. The attention was overwhelming. 6 amber eyes tracking her every movement as she crossed the room. She felt examined, measured, wanted, in a way that made her skin flush despite the cold. "Good morning, Miss Hartwell." Dalton's voice was carefully neutral. "I hope you slept well." "Well enough, thank you." Nola remained standing, unsure where to position herself in this space that belonged to them. Beck pulled out the chair closest to the fire. "Please sit. You must be hungry." She sat, and within moments a plate appeared in front of her. Bacon, fried eggs, thick slices of bread toasted on the stove, more food than she usually ate in a day. When she looked up to thank whoever had served her, she found all three of them watching with that same intense focus. "Eat," Rhett said. It was not quite a command, but close. "You are too thin. City living." Nola picked up her fork with fingers that trembled slightly. "You are all staring at me." "Yes," Dalton agreed. He made no apology for it. She ate slowly, forcing herself to chew and swallow despite the nervousness coiling in her stomach. The food was good, simple, but well prepared. When she finished, Beck refilled her coffee without being asked. The gesture was domestic, intimate, in a way that unsettled her. Finally, when she could delay no longer, she set down her cup and met Dalton's eyes directly. "You said we would talk today. about expectations, about what you want from me. Yes. Dalton pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Rhett and Beck moved to flank him, creating a wall of masculine presence that made Nola feel very small and very female. Dalton folded his hands on the table. First, I need to know, are you running from something or someone? Nola's throat tightened. She had not planned to tell them, but looking at those three identical faces, at the intelligence in their eyes, she knew they would accept nothing less than truth. Someone she admitted quietly. A man. Richard Cornelius Blackwell. He was my guardian after my parents died. He wanted to marry me, control my inheritance. When I refused, he became violent. I ran. Something dangerous flashed in Rhett's eyes. Did he touch you? Not in the way you mean, but he hurt me. And he would have done worse if I had stayed. Beck's jaw tightened. He will not find you here. Are you certain? Nola asked. He has money, resources. Dalton's voice was iron. The law reaches this far, but slowly. And men like us, we handle our own justice. If he comes, he will not leave this mountain alive. The certainty in his words should have frightened her. Instead, she felt something loosen in her chest. Safety. For the first time in years, the possibility of actual safety. Now my question, Dalton continued. Mother Superior's letter said you were a sister, but you are not. You have taken no vows. No. She lied to protect me, to give me a way out that Cornelius could not follow. So you are free, legally, religiously, in every way that matters. Yes. Good. Dalton leaned forward slightly. Then I will be direct, Miss Hartwell. We want you to stay, not as a guest or a housekeeper, as our wife. There it was, the offer laid bare. All three of you, Nola said. At once, yes. That is illegal. Polygamy is against the law in every territory. Rhett spoke up, his rough voice matter of fact. The law says a man cannot have multiple wives. It says nothing about multiple husbands. That is semantics, perhaps, but out here, the law is what we make it. No one will ask questions as long as we are discreet. Nola looked from one face to another. This is madness. How would it even work, practically, I mean? Beck's voice was gentle when he answered. We would share you in every way. You would be wife to all three of us. You would sleep in our beds, bear our children, share our lives. And we would provide for you, protect you, cherish you. You do not even know me. How can you want this? Dalton's eyes never left hers. We know enough. You are brave. You came 2,000 miles alone to escape a terrible situation. You are educated. I saw the Greek Bible in your bag. You are resourceful. You survived as a woman alone in Boston, which is no small thing. He paused. And you are beautiful. Heat flooded Nola's face. Beauty fades, Dalton continued. But character does not. We are not asking you to love us, Miss Hartwell. Not immediately. We are asking you to choose survival, to choose a life here where you will be safe and valued rather than whatever uncertain future awaits you if you leave. And if I cannot bear it, if I try and find I cannot share myself that way, then you leave. Dalton pushed back from the table and walked to a shelf. He returned with a small leather pouch and set it in front of her. The clink of coins was audible. $300. Enough for passage anywhere in the country and money to live on while you establish yourself. We give you 3 months. If at the end of that time you want to leave, this money is yours, no questions, no recriminations. Nola stared at the pouch. $300. More money than she had seen in her entire life. Why would you do that? Give me so much and ask for nothing guaranteed in return. Rhett leaned against the table, his massive arms crossed. Because we want you willing. A woman taken against her will is not a wife. She is a prisoner. We have no interest in prisoners. We want you to choose that, Beck added. To choose us. Every day for as long as you stay. The choice he offered, the power he gave her, was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Nola's hands trembled as she picked up her coffee cup, needing something to do. You said you would share me in every way. I need you to be specific. I am not a fool. I know what happens between a husband and wife. But 3 husbands. Dalton's eyes darkened slightly. You want us to tell you plainly what we expect? Yes. He glanced at his brothers, then back at her. Very well. If you stay, you will belong to all 3 of us. You will kiss us, touch us, lie with us. You will learn what pleases each of us, and we will learn what pleases you. We will share your body, sometimes one at a time, sometimes together. Nola's breath caught. Together, you mean simultaneously? Yes. No hesitation, no shame. That is not possible. Physically, I mean. Rhett's smile was dark. It is. Lorelei managed it. The name hung in the air like smoke. Nola set down her cup carefully. Tell me about her. If I am to live in her room, sleep in her bed, take her place, I deserve to know who she was. The brothers exchanged looks. Some silent communication passed between them. Finally, Dalton nodded. Her name was Lorelei Whitmore before she married me. He corrected himself with emphasis. Just me. She came west with her family when she was 18. They settled in Pine Ridge. Her father ran the general store. She was small, dark-haired, quick to laugh. She had a gift for making things beautiful. That quilt on your bed, the cross by the window, half the things in this cabin, she made them. His voice softened with memory. I met her at a church social in 1861. I was drawn to her immediately. I thought I would court her, marry her, bring her here. I did not know my brothers had the same idea. Beck took up the story. We all loved her. The moment we saw her, we knew she was special. We thought we would have to compete, that she would choose one of us. But Lorelei had other ideas. She told us she loved Dalton. Rhett continued, that she wanted to marry him. So Dalton courted her properly, asked her father's permission, married her in the church on January 1st, 1862, legal and binding. She was Dalton's wife. His voice grew rough. But after the wedding, after they came here, Lorelei told Dalton she had feelings for Beck and me as well. She asked if we could all live together, if maybe over time she could be wife to all three. It took months to accept, Beck said quietly. We were raised to believe in traditional marriage. But Lorelei was patient. She showed us that love did not have to follow society's rules, that we could build something different here, away from judgment. So we did, Dalton finished. For 7 years, Lorelei was my wife legally. But in this cabin in our hearts, she belonged to all three of us. She gave herself to us without reservation. And we loved her more than life. What happened to her? Nola asked softly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Dalton's face became granite. His hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles went white. For a long moment he said nothing. Then in a voice rough with pain, it was winter. 8 years ago this month, December 24th. The coincidence sent chills down Nola's spine. The same day she had arrived. Lorelei woke early that morning, Dalton continued. Said she wanted to gather firewood before we started cooking Christmas dinner. We told her no. The snow was too deep, nearly 4 feet in places. We would go. But Lorelei was stubborn, independent. She hated feeling helpless. Beck's voice was thick with grief. We were in the barn tending the horses. We heard her leave the cabin. By the time we realized she had not come back, an hour had passed. Rhett's jaw was tight. We went out searching, calling her name. The snow was falling so thick we could barely see 10 feet ahead. I found her, Dalton said, his eyes distant with memory, 100 yards from the cabin, face down in the snow. I thought she had simply fallen, hit her head on a rock hidden beneath the white. I carried her back. Her body was still warm. I thought I prayed maybe she was just unconscious. His voice broke completely. But when Beck examined her, when he removed her scarf, we saw them. Bruises, dark purple bruises in the shape of fingers wrapped around her throat. Someone had strangled her, then left her there to die in the cold. The horror of it stole Nola's breath. Who? Who would do such a thing? We do not know. The words were torn from Dalton. There were no tracks. The snow had covered everything. No one else lived on this mountain. The nearest neighbor was Montgomery Thane, 5 miles away, and he swore he had not left his cabin that day. Montgomery Thane. Nola's blood ran cold, remembering the man from the stagecoach, the way he had looked at her, the words he had spoken. He loved Lorelei too, Beck said quietly. Before I married her, he asked her to choose him. She refused, but we never thought we could not imagine. We buried her the next day, Rhett continued, on the hill under the aspens. And we have lived with the guilt ever since. We should have gone with her, should have stopped her, should have protected her. It was not your fault, Nola said, but the words felt hollow. Was it not Dalton's eyes were haunted? We were her husbands, all three of us, and we failed her. She died alone, terrified, murdered. While we were safe in the barn with the horses, the confession hung in the air. 8 years of grief and guilt laid bare. Nola stood and crossed to Dalton Dune. She took his face in her small hands, forcing him to look at her. You did not kill her. Someone else did. Someone evil. And that person, whoever they are the ones who should carry the guilt. Not you. Something in Dalton's expression cracked, and for the first time in 8 years, he wept. Great racking sobs that shook his massive frame. His brothers came to him, holding him, and they cried together for Lorelei, for their failure, for the years of isolation and guilt. And Nola held them, all these 3 broken men, and vowed silently that she would help them heal. That she would love them enough to fill the hole Lorelei's death had left. That she would not let the past destroy their future. When the storm of grief passed, they sat together by the fire. Nola between Dalton and Beck. Rhett standing guard at the window as if expecting danger to arrive at any moment. I have conditions, Nola said finally. If I am to do this, Dalton met her eyes. Name them. First, I want the 3 months you promised. At the end, I decide whether to stay permanently or take the money and leave. Agreed. Second, if I do this, if I stay, you will treat me as an equal partner, not a possession. I will have a say in decisions that affect me. Rhett nodded. Fair. Third, she paused, gathering courage. You will be patient with me. I am not experienced. I do not know how to please a man, let alone 3. You will have to teach me, and you will go slowly. Beck's voice was gentle. We will treat you like the precious thing you are. Nola took a deep breath. Then I accept. For 3 months, I will be your wife. The change in the room was immediate. The tension that had stretched tight all day suddenly released. Dalton stood slowly and his brothers rose with him. They approached her together, moving with that eerie coordination. When they stopped in front of her, she had to tilt her head back to look at their faces. Even after hours of growing accustomed to their size, the sheer physicality of them was overwhelming. You will not regret this, Dalton said. His hand rose, hesitated, then cupped her face. His palm was warm, callous, gentle. We will make sure of it. Rhett's hand found her waist. Even through the layers of her dress and corset, she felt the heat of him. You are ours now. For 3 months, she reminded him, though her voice came out breathless. For 3 months, he agreed, but his smile suggested he thought it would be much longer. Beck stepped closer, his hand settling on her shoulder. Are you frightened? Nola considered lying, then decided on truth. Terrified. Good. That means you understand what you have chosen. But Nola, we will not claim you tonight. You need time to adjust, to trust us. How much time? The brothers exchanged looks. Some silent communication passed between them. A week, Dalton decided. We will spend the next 7 days teaching you about this life, about us, building trust. And then when you are ready, we will show you what it means to belong to 3 men. 7 days, 1 week to prepare for the unknown. Nola nodded, not trusting her voice. That night, she lay in Lorelei's bed and listened to the brothers move through their evening routine. The sound of water being poured for washing, the creak of floorboards as they walked, low voices discussing plans for tomorrow. And then later, the sound of one of them playing a harmonica. The tune was mournful, beautiful, filled with longing. She pressed her hand against her stomach, feeling the flutter of nerves there. She had agreed to this, had chosen it. In 7 days, everything would change. But for tonight, she was still innocent, still hers alone. The music faded, the fire died down. The cabin settled into silence. And Nola dreamed of 3 pairs of amber eyes and hands large enough to span her waist in the slow, terrifying thrill of surrender. The next morning began her education. Beck woke her with a gentle knock. Time to learn Nola. She dressed and found them waiting. Over breakfast, Dalton explained the rhythm of their days. They rose before dawn, tended the animals first checked. Traps gathered wood. Mornings were for heavy labor. Afternoons for maintenance and preparation. Evenings for rest. You will learn all of it, he said. How to keep this place running. It is not enough to cook and sew, though those matter. You need to know how to survive if something happens to us. The practicality of it surprised her. They were not treating her like a delicate flower to be protected. They were treating her like a partner who needed training. After breakfast, Rhett took her outside. The cold bit through her cloak, immediately stealing her breath. He grinned at her discomfort. City lungs, he said. You will adjust. He showed her the barn first. 3 horses, including Lucy, a milk cow chickens, huddled in a coop he had built with careful attention to insulation. He demonstrated how to feed them, how to collect eggs without spooking the hens, how to milk the cow. These animals keep us alive in winter, he said. You will care for them like they are your own children. His hands covered hers on the bucket, showing her the rhythm of milking. The contact was casual, instructional, but Nola felt the strength in his grip, felt how easily he could overpower her if he chose. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, it made heat coil low in her belly. They moved to the woodpile. Rhett handed her an axe much smaller than the one he used. Show me how you would split this. Nola looked at the round of wood dubiously. I have never done this. Then it is time to learn. She positioned the wood, lifted, the axe swung. The blade bounced off harmlessly. Rhett moved behind her, his chest pressed against her back, his arms coming around to adjust her grip. She felt the solid wall of muscle, the heat of him even through their clothes. Feel the weight, he said, his voice rough near her ear. Let it do the work. Do not fight it. He guided her through the motion. Lift, swing, follow through. The blade bit into the wood this time, though it did not split. Again, they worked through 10 rounds. By the end, Nola's arms shook with exhaustion, but she had managed to split 3 pieces on her own. Rhett looked at her with something like respect. You are stronger than you look. Good. You will need to be. That afternoon, Beck taught her about the supplies. He showed her the root cellar built into the hillside, insulated with stone and earth. Inside were barrels of flour and cornmeal, sacks of beans and rice, smoked meat, hanging from hooks, jars of preserved vegetables and fruit. Enough to last through a long winter with careful rationing. We stock up in fall, he explained. Once the snows come deep, we cannot get to town for months. Everything we need, we keep here. He taught her how to inventory supplies, how to rotate stock so nothing's spoiled, how to make meals stretch. His voice was patient, his explanations clear, and occasionally, accidentally, his hand would brush hers. Each contact sent sparks through her skin. In the evening, Dalton took over. He sat with her by the fire and showed her the books on the shelf. We are not educated men by Boston standards, he said, but we read, we think. Lorelei insisted on it. He handed her a worn copy of Walden. Have you read Thoreau's Some? My father had his essays. Read this passage. He pointed to a section on solitude. Nola read aloud Thoreau's words about simplicity, about stripping life down to its essentials, about finding truth in wilderness. When she finished, Dalton was watching her with those intense amber eyes. That is why we live here. Not because we cannot handle civilization, but because we choose not to. Out here, we make our own rules, live by our own code, including sharing a wife. Including that, he leaned closer. Does it still frighten you? What we will ask of you. Nola's mouth went dry. Yes. Good. Fear keeps you cautious. But Nola, I want you to know something. When the time comes when we claim you, it will not be about our pleasure alone. We will make sure you find satisfaction, that your body learns to crave what we give it. The bluntness of his words made her cheeks burn. I do not know if that is possible. For a woman, his smile was dark. It is. Lorelei proved it, and you will too. He stood, leaving her flushed and confused by the fire. The days fell into a pattern. Mornings with Rhett learning physical labor. Her body grew stronger, her hands more capable. Afternoons with Beck learning the domestic skills that kept them alive. Her mind absorbed information about food, medicine, survival. Evenings with Dalton learning about ideas about this life they had chosen. And always the undercurrent of awareness. The accidental touches that lingered too long. The looks that heated her skin. The growing anticipation of what was coming. On the 4th night, as she lay in bed, she heard sounds from the main room. Low voices. Then something else, a groan unmistakably masculine. Her face flamed as she realized what they were doing, relieving tension without her. Part of her was relieved, but another part she was only beginning to acknowledge felt excluded. Wanted to know what they looked like in pleasure, what sounds they made, what it would feel like to be the cause of those groans. The 5th day, Rhett took her to check the trap line. They walked through deep snow for over an hour. He moved with easy confidence, reading signs in the forest that were invisible to her. When they found a rabbit in one of the traps, he showed her how to reset it, how to carry the kill, how to skin it later. You never know when you will need to feed yourself, he said. Pretty city girls learn or they die out here. But when he helped her over a fallen log, his hand stayed on her waist longer than necessary. And when their eyes met, she saw raw want in his gaze. That night at dinner, the tension was thick enough to taste. Nola felt the weight of their stares, the heat building in the small cabin. Her body responded despite her nervousness. Her nipples tightened under her dress. Wetness gathered between her thighs, strange and unfamiliar. After the dishes were cleared, Beck brought her a cup of tea. As he handed it to her, his fingers deliberately stroked hers. The contact was electric. 2 more days, he said quietly. Can you feel it? The anticipation. Yes, she whispered. Good. We want you ready. Wanting. On the 6th day, Dalton took her to the hilltop where Lorelei was buried. The simple wooden marker was half buried in snow. He cleared it with his bare hands, revealing the carved name. Lorelei Brennan, beloved, 1844 to 1869. I need you to understand something, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I loved her. We all did. Losing her nearly destroyed us. But Nola, you are not her replacement. You are something new, something we did not expect. And I find myself looked at the grave, at the mountains, looked at the grave, at the mountains beyond, at the white wilderness that stretched in all directions. Then she looked at Dalton's face, at the need and the promise written there. I am ready, she said, and meant it. That night, her last night untouched, Nola could not sleep. She lay in Lorelei's bed and listened to her own heartbeat and wondered what tomorrow would bring. Pain or pleasure, regret or revelation. In the main room, she heard the brothers talking. She is ready. Are we? It has been 8 years. We will be gentle, patient. We will make this good for her. She is so small. We will have to be careful not to hurt her. The first time will hurt regardless. But we will make up for it. Show her pleasures she has never imagined. Silence. Then Dalton's voice lower. Tomorrow night she becomes ours. Truly. All 3 of us will claim her. And after that, there will be no going back. Nola pressed her hand between her legs, feeling the ache building there. Her body already knew what her mind was still accepting. She wanted this, wanted them, wanted to know what it felt like to be claimed completely. Tomorrow night she would find out. But first she needed to address what she had seen. The shadow outside the window on that first night, the entries in Lorelei's diary, the threat that had never been resolved. On the morning of the 7th day, instead of following the usual routine, Nola asked the brothers to sit with her. She placed Lorelei's diary on the table between them. I found this, she said, in the sewing basket. I know I should not have read it, but I did. The brothers stared at the small, leather-bound book like it was a serpent. What does it say? Beck asked quietly. Nola opened to the entries from December's 1869. She read them aloud. Monty's harassment, his threats, Lorelei's fear. The final entry about seeing him outside the window the night before she died. When she finished, the silence was absolute. Then Red exploded. He stood so violently his chair crashed backward. 8 years. 8 goddamn years we did not know. That bastard killed her, and we let him walk free. We had no proof, Dalton said, but his voice shook. Still have no proof. A diary is not evidence of murder. It is evidence he was stalking her, Nola said. Evidence she was afraid of him. Evidence he was here watching the night before she died. Beck picked up the diary with shaking hands. All this time we blamed ourselves, and he was out there, living, free. What do we do? Nola asked. Dalton stood slowly. His face had gone cold, empty, dangerous. We set a trap. We use you as bait. Monty has been watching this cabin. I have seen signs. Boot prints in the snow where they should not be. I think he is curious about you. Interested the way he was interested in Lorelei. Absolutely not. Rhett snarled. We are not risking her. I am willing, Nola said. If it means justice for Lorelei. If it means ending this threat. The brothers looked at her. At the determination in her face. At the courage she was offering. We will discuss it, Dalton said finally, but not today. Today is for something else. Tonight is for us. That evening they prepared. Beck heated water for a bath. Rhett brought wood to build up the fire until the cabin was almost too warm. Dalton made dinner simple but good, though Nola could barely taste it. After the meal, Beck led her to the bath. Steam rose from the water, fragrant with herbs, lavender and mint and something else she could not name. Take your time, he said. Prepare yourself. We will come for you when you are ready and you're ready. Nola undressed slowly, her fingers clumsy on buttons and laces. When she finally stood naked, she caught sight of herself in the small mirror propped against the wall. Her body was slender, pale, untouched. Modest breasts with pale pink nipples. A narrow waist flaring to rounded hips. The triangle of honey blonde hair between her thighs. She looked fragile, delicate. How would her body accommodate 3 men the size of the Brennan brothers? The bathwater was hot, almost scalding, but she sank into it gratefully. She washed carefully using the soap they had left. Her hands trembled as she cleaned between her legs, feeling the sensitive flesh there. Tonight, that intimate place would be breached, claimed, used. The thought made her breath catch. After the bath, she found a clean nightgown laid out on the bed. White cotton, simple but soft. She put it on, feeling the fabric whisper against her sensitized skin. Then she brushed out her hair until it fell in waves past her shoulders. She looked at herself in the mirror one last time. The girl looking back was terrified but determined. Ready. She waited as the sun sank lower, painting the snow outside gold and orange. Her heart hammered so hard she felt dizzy. Every sound from the main room made her jump. Finally, as the last light faded, she heard footsteps. A knock on her door. Nola, Dalton's voice. It is time. She opened the door on shaking legs. All 3 brothers stood there, freshly washed, wearing only their trousers. Their massive chests were bare, revealing the full extent of their muscular builds. Defined pectorals, clearly outlined abdominal muscles in perfect rows of 6, broad shoulders tapering to narrow waists, arms thick with muscle veins visible under tan skin. They were identical perfection, overwhelming in their masculine beauty. Dalton extended his hand. Come with us. Nola placed her small hand in his massive one, his fingers closed around hers, warm and strong. He led her into the main bedroom, his brothers following. The room had been transformed. The large bed was made with fresh linens, white and clean. Candles burned on every surface, filling the space with soft golden light. The fireplace blazed, making the room almost too warm. It looked like a wedding chamber, which she supposed it was. Rhett closed the door behind them. The sound of the latch falling was final, irrevocable. Dalton turned to face her, still holding her hand. Last chance, Nola. If you want to stop, say so now. Once this begins, we will not stop until all 3 of us have claimed you. Nola's voice came out barely above a whisper. I do not want to stop. Something fierce flashed in his eyes. Then we begin. He pulled her close, one hand cupping her face, the other settling on her waist. She had to tilt her head back to look at him. For a moment, he just stared at her, his thumb stroking her cheek. You are beautiful, he said. Perfect. Then he kissed her. His lips were firm, warm, commanding. Not harsh, but insistent, coaxing her mouth open. When her lips parted, his tongue swept inside, tasting her, claiming her. The kiss was nothing like she had imagined. It was consuming, possessive, stealing her breath and her thoughts, until all she knew was the taste of him and the strength of his arms around her. When he finally pulled back, she was panting. My turn, Rhett said. He spun her around, pulling her back against his chest. She felt the hard wall of muscle, the heat of his skin burning through her thin nightgown. His arms came around her, one hand splaying across her stomach, the other tilting her head to the side. His kiss was rougher than Dalton's, more demanding. He bit her lower lip gently, then soothed it with his tongue. His hand on her stomach slid higher, coming to rest just beneath her breasts. She could feel his arousal pressing against her lower back, hard and insistent. The evidence of his desire sent a bolt of heat through her. When Rhett released her, she swayed. Beck caught her, turning her to face him. His approach was different. He murmured against her mouth. So he murmured against her mouth. So responsive already. Dalton's hands found the hem of her nightgown. Time to see what we have claimed. He lifted it slowly, dragging the fabric up her thighs, her hips, her waist. She raised her arms and he pulled it over her head, leaving her naked in the candlelight. All 3 brothers went, still staring at her exposed body with identical expressions of hunger and reverence. Perfect, Rhett breathed. Made for us. Their eyes traced every curve, every inch of pale skin. Nola fought the urge to cover herself, to hide from that intense scrutiny. Instead, she forced herself to stand straight, shoulders back, letting them look their fill. Beck approached first, his hand reaching out to cup her breast. His palm was huge, rough, with calluses, warm. He squeezed gently, his thumb brushing across her nipple. The sensation shot straight between her legs, making her gasp. Sensitive, he observed. Good. Rhett moved behind her, his hands settling on her hips, pulling her back against him. She felt his bare chest against her spine, the heat of him overwhelming. His hands slid up her sides, cupping her breast from behind, rolling her nipples between his fingers. Nola moaned, the sound escaping before she could stop it. That is it, Rhett growled in her ear. Let us hear you. Let us know what you feel. Dalton knelt before her. The sight of this massive man on his knees made something clench in her chest. His hands ran up her thighs, spreading them slightly. His amber eyes met hers. I am going to touch you here, he said, his hand moving to the apex of her thighs. I am going to make you ready for us. His fingers brushed through the soft hair, then lower, finding the wetness gathered there. He groaned. You are already wet. Your body knows what it wants. One thick finger circled her entrance, gathering moisture, then moved up to find the small bundle of nerves she barely knew existed. When he touched it, pleasure sparked through her so intensely her knees buckled. Rhett held her upright, his hands still working her breasts. Dalton's fingers circled that sensitive spot again and again, building pressure, building heat. Nola's hips began to move of their own accord, seeking more contact. Her breathing came in short gasps. That is it, Dalton encouraged. Chase it. Let yourself feel. The pressure built and built until Nola thought she would shatter. Then Dalton's finger pressed hard against that spot, and something exploded inside her. Pleasure crashed through her in waves, making her cry out, making her body convulse. She would have fallen if Rhett had not been holding her. As the pleasure faded, leaving her trembling and dazed, she heard Rhett's rough laugh. One down, he said, many more to go. They guided her to the bed, laying her down on the soft linens. She looked up at three identical faces, all watching her with hunger and satisfaction. And Nola understood that her education had only just begun. The next 6 weeks passed in a haze of learning and longing. Nola's body adapted to her new life with shocking speed. The soreness from that first night faded within days, replaced by a hunger she had never known existed. Each night, the brothers claimed her in different combinations, teaching her that pleasure had no limits, no boundaries, save those created by imagination and desire. But the days belonged to survival. Winter tightened its grip on the mountain. Snow fell in waves that buried the cabin to the windowsills. The temperature dropped so low that water froze in its bucket overnight. They lived by the fire, rationing supplies, telling stories to pass the endless dark hours. Nola learned to shoot a rifle, learned to track game through snow, learned which plants could heal and which could kill. She was becoming something new, something forged by necessity and wilderness. The frightened girl who had fled Boston was disappearing, replaced by a woman who could split wood and dress a deer and stare down 3 massive men without flinching. On the 10th of February, Beck found her vomiting into the snow behind the cabin. He did not need to ask questions, simply examined her with hands that had delivered countless foals and calves, checking her pulse, her color, the tenderness of her breasts. You are with child, he said quietly. 5, maybe 6 weeks along. Nola stared at him, the world tilting. So soon. How is that possible? Beck smiled gently. We were very thorough. She expected to feel trapped. Instead, she felt a fierce joy she could not name. A child, growing inside her. A piece of all 3 brothers, though they would never know which one had planted the seed. That evening, she told Dalton and Rhett. They reacted with a protectiveness that was both touching and suffocating. Dalton immediately forbade her from lifting anything heavy. Rhett wanted her to stay inside where it was warm. Beck prepared special teas to ease the morning sickness. But underneath the joy, Nola felt anger building. They had wanted this, had planned for it. A child would bind her to them in ways no promise could. Did you do this deliberately? She asked one night as they lay tangled in the massive bed. Get me pregnant to ensure I would stay. Dalton did not lie. Yes, Rhett rolled over to face her. A child gives you a reason to stay that has nothing to do with us, something to protect. We thought it would help. And if I had wanted to leave, if I still want to leave, Beck's hand found hers in the darkness. Then you leave. The money is still yours. The choice is still yours. But Nola, a child needs both parents, needs stability. Would you really take our baby into uncertainty? She wanted to rage at the manipulation, but looking at their faces, at the vulnerability beneath the strength, she understood. They were terrified she would go, terrified of being alone again. The pregnancy was insurance born of desperation, not cruelty. I am not leaving, she said finally. Not because of the baby, because I choose this. Choose you, all three of you. The relief in their eyes was profound, but 2 days later, everything changed. Nola was hanging laundry on the line strung between cabin and barn when she felt the prickling sensation of being watched. She turned slowly, scanning the tree line. There, a shadow among the pines, man-shaped, motionless. She dropped the sheet she was holding and ran for the cabin. Dalton met her at the door, rifle already in hand. Someone is watching, she gasped. In the trees to the north. The brothers moved with frightening efficiency. Rhett and Beck grabbed weapons and disappeared out the back door, circling to flank whoever was out there. Dalton stayed with Nola, his body a shield between her and the windows. 10 minutes later, Rhett returned alone. Boot prints in the snow, leading up the mountain toward Thane's place. Whoever it was, they ran when they saw us coming. Dalton's jaw tightened. He is testing us, seeing how alert we are. How vulnerable Nola is when she is alone. That night, they found something worse. A letter nailed to the barn door with a hunting knife. The paper was rough, the handwriting crude but readable. She was mine first. You are stealing again. Leave before spring or join her in the frozen ground. Nola read it twice, her hands shaking. Join her. Lorelei. Montgomery Thane was confessing without confessing, threatening without leaving evidence that could be used against him. Rhett wanted to hunt Thane immediately, track him to his cabin and end this. But Dalton stopped him. That is what he wants, to draw us away from Nola, to leave her unprotected. We will not give him that satisfaction. So what do we do? Beck demanded. Wait for him to kill her like he killed Lorelei. No, Dalton said quietly. We set a trap. We let him think he has an opening. And when he takes it, we end him. Nola understood what he was suggesting. Use me as bait. The brothers erupted in simultaneous protest. Dalton raised a hand, silencing them. She is the only bait that will work. Monty wants Nola because she represents what he lost. Lorelei's replacement. He will not be able to resist if he thinks he can take her. I will not risk her, Rhett snarled. I will not watch another woman die. Then we make sure he does not get close enough to hurt her, Dalton said. We control every variable. Choose the ground. Choose the timing. And we make certain he never leaves this mountain alive. Nola met his eyes. I am willing, if it means justice for Lorelei, if it means we can finally be free of this shadow. It took 3 days to plan. They chose the clearing near Lorelei's grave. High ground, good visibility, multiple escape routes. Dalton and Beck would hide in the trees on opposite sides. Rhett would stay with Nola concealed, but close enough to intervene if needed. On the 15th of February, they enacted the plan. Nola walked up to Lorelei's grave alone, visible from the trail that led past Thane's cabin. She carried a basket of winter flowers, dried and fragile. She knelt by the marker and began clearing snow, moving slowly, making herself vulnerable. An hour passed, then 2. The cold seeped through her cloak. Her fingers went numb. She was beginning to think Monty would not take the bait when she heard the crunch of boots in snow. She turned. Montgomery Thane stood at the edge of the clearing, rifle slung over his shoulder. His pale eyes were bright with something that might have been madness or might have been grief. Pretty, he said, like she was. Lorelei, you have her coloring, her size, but you are not her. No, Nola agreed, forcing herself to remain calm. I am not Lorelei. I am Magnolia Hartwell, and I am the Brennan's wife. Monty laughed, a sound like breaking ice. Wife. They do not marry. They own. Lorelei was Dalton's wife. The other two just used her, made her a whore. She loved them, Nola said, all 3 of them. I read her diary. She wrote about how happy she was. Something ugly twisted Monty's face. She would have been happier with me. I offered her everything. A real marriage. One husband. Respectability. But she chose degradation instead. He took a step closer. You are making the same mistake. Letting them ruin you. But it is not too late. Come with me. I will take you somewhere safe. Marry you proper. Nola stood slowly. And if I refuse, then you will learn what happens to women who choose wrong. He reached for her, and the forest exploded with movement. Dalton and Beck emerged from the trees, rifles raised. Rhett appeared behind Monty, knife drawn. The hunter froze, trapped. Drop your weapon, Dalton commanded. Monty's hand twitched toward his rifle. Rhett's knife pressed against his throat, drawing a thin line of blood. I said drop it. The rifle fell to the snow. Monty raised his hand slowly, but his eyes held no fear. Only a strange satisfaction, as if he had been waiting for this moment. You going to kill me? He asked. Like you should have done 8 years ago. Dalton stepped closer. Did you kill Lorelei? For a long moment, Monty said nothing. Then he smiled. Yes, I killed her. Followed her out that morning. Begged her to leave you. She refused. Said she loved you, all 3 of you, that nothing would change her mind. His voice grew rough. I grabbed her, just meant to shake some sense into her. But my hands were around her throat and she kept fighting, and then she stopped moving. I left her in the snow, thought you would think it was an accident. The confession hung in the frozen air. Rhett's knife pressed harder. Say the word Dalton, I will end him. No, Nola said. Her voice cut through the tension. He needs to face justice, real justice, not revenge. There is no justice out here, Monty said. Only survival. You kill me or I kill you. That is the frontier. Then we take you to town, Beck said. Let the sheriff handle it. Let the law decide. Monty laughed again. The sheriff will not do anything. No witnesses, no proof, just my word against yours. And I will say you threatened me, tried to kill me. Who do you think they will believe? Dalton's finger tightened on his trigger. Maybe we do not give them a choice. But before anyone could move, the sound of multiple horses echoed through the forest. A group of riders appeared on the trail. 7 men led by one who made Nola's blood run cold. Cornelius Blackwell sat astride a black gelding, dressed in expensive Boston clothes that looked absurd in the wilderness. Behind him rode 6 hired guns, all armed, all watchful. Catherine Cornelius called out. He still used her given name, a possession he refused to relinquish. I have come to take you home. The brothers shifted rifles, swinging toward the new threat, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Monty forgotten, they formed a protective circle around Nola. This is her home, Dalton said, his voice deadly calm. You are trespassing on our land. Cornelius dismounted slowly, brushing snow from his coat with meticulous care. Your land, Catherine, is my ward, my legal responsibility until she reaches 21, which she has not yet done. He reached into his coat and produced a document. Moreover, she is my wife. We were married in Boston on December 20th, 1877. I have the certificate to prove it. Nola's heart stopped. The marriage certificate. She had known Cornelius might try. This might forge documents to establish legal claim. But seeing it sealed and official looking made the threat terrifyingly real. That is a lie, she said. I was on a train from Boston on December 20th. I never signed that document. Cornelius smiled. The signature is yours. Witnessed by 2 respectable citizens, recorded with the city clerk. Legally binding. You are Mrs. Cornelius Blackwell, Catherine. These men are harboring a married woman. That is a crime. Dalton stepped forward. That certificate is forged. Nola never went to Boston. She has been here since late December. Prove it. Cornelius challenged. Show me evidence that she was here on December 20th. Can you? We have her train tickets, Beck said. Documentation of her journey. Tickets can be purchased when anyone won, Cornelius countered. They do not prove who used them. The sheriff will sort this out, Dalton said. We go to Pine Ridge, present both sides. Let the law decide, agreed, Cornelius said easily. He gestured to his men. Escort Catherine to her horse. She will ride with us. Over my dead body, Rhett growled. That can be arranged, one of Cornelius's men said, his hand dropping to his pistol. The standoff stretched tight as a wire. 7 guns against 3. Monty Thane standing forgotten between the groups, blood still trickling from the shallow cut on his throat. Then another voice cut through the tension, a voice Nola recognized from the stagecoach journey. I would not do that if I were you, Blackwell. A new group emerged from the trees. Ambrose Whitmore and his wife Charity, along with 5 men from Pine Ridge. They were not heavily armed, but their presence shifted the balance. What is this? Cornelius demanded. This is neighbors looking after neighbors, Ambrose said. We heard there might be trouble up here. Came to make sure the Brennans and Miss Hartwell were safe. Mrs. Blackwell Cornelius corrected. And this is a private family matter. Charity Whitmore stepped forward, her face hard. I was on the stagecoach with Miss Hartwell when she arrived. I saw her step off that coach for the first time on December 30th. She could not have been in Boston on December 20th getting married. That is just your word, Cornelius said. Then how about mine? The Pine Ridge boarding house owner, Mrs. Lucinda Graves, pushed through the group. I met Catherine on the train from Chicago. We traveled together for 2 days. She told me she was going to family in Colorado. Seemed like a girl running from something. Now I know what. And mine added the old prospector from the stagecoach, Ezekiel Porter. I was there too, saw her arrive. Fresh off the train, scared but determined. That is not a woman who just got married. Cornelius's composure cracked slightly. You are all lying to protect them. Why would we lie? Ambrose asked reasonably. We barely know the Brennans, but we know when we see injustice. And we know a liar when we hear one. The sheriff of Pine Ridge, Eugene Brennan, cousin to Dalton, rode into the clearing. He took in the scene with experienced eyes. 2 armed groups facing off, Monty Thane bleeding, Nola protected by the brothers, the townspeople forming a third faction. Somebody want to tell me what in hell is going on here? Dalton spoke first. This man, Montgomery Thane, just confessed to murdering my wife 8 years ago. Strangled her and left her to die in the snow. We have witnesses. And this man, he gestured to Cornelius, has a forged marriage certificate claiming Nola as his wife. He is trying to abduct her under color of law. These are serious accusations, Sheriff Brennan said. He was Dalton's cousin, but his tone remained neutral. Professional. Monty, did you kill Lorelei Brennan? Monty looked at the sheriff, at the crowd of witnesses, at the rifle still pointed in his direction. Something in him seemed to break. The madness that had sustained him for 8 years finally consuming whatever sanity remained. Yes, he said, I killed her. She was mine, should have been mine. But she chose them, chose to be degraded. So I ended it, ended her suffering. The sheriff's face went hard. Montgomery Thane, you are under arrest for the murder of Lorelei Brennan. He turned to his deputy. Take him. As the deputy moved to restrain Monty, the hunter's eyes found Nola. Fixed on her with terrible intensity. You are making the same mistake he said, choosing them. But you will learn, they destroy everything they touch, just like they destroyed her. He lunged, not toward the deputy, but toward Nola. His hand snatched a concealed knife from his boot. The blade flashed in the winter light. Rhett moved faster. His body slammed into Monty's, deflecting the attack. The knife meant for Nola's heart struck Rhett's shoulder, instead sinking deep. Both men went down in a tangle of limbs. The gunshot was deafening. The sheriff's pistol spoke once and Monty Thane jerked, then went still. Blood spread across the snow, impossibly red against the white. Nola screamed, dropped to her knees beside Rhett. The knife jutted from his shoulder, blood pulsing around the blade. Beck was there instantly, his medical training taking over. Do not pull it out, he commanded. Not until we can control the bleeding. Rhett, can you hear me? Rhett's eyes found Nola's. Are you hurt? Did he touch you? Oh, she sobbed. No, you saved me. You stupid, brave, impossible man. Dalton turned to Cornelius, his rifle leveled at the merchant's chest. Your turn. Explain the marriage certificate. But Cornelius was already backing toward his horse. His hired men, seeing how quickly the situation had deteriorated, were mounting as well. They had signed on for intimidation, not murder charges. This is not over, Cornelius said. I have legal documents. The law is on my side. The law, Sheriff Brennan said coldly, is right here. And if that certificate is forged, you are looking at fraud charges at minimum, maybe conspiracy to kidnap. I suggest you stay in town until we sort this out. I will be at the boarding house, Cornelius said, waiting for justice. He looked at Nola one last time. You were supposed to be mine, Catherine. You owe me for years of care. One way or another, you will pay that debt. He rode away, his men following. The clearing slowly emptied as the townspeople dispersed, offering help and support, but recognizing that the Brennans needed space. Beck worked on Rhett's wound with steady hands. The knife had missed major blood vessels, but had torn muscle and tendon. It would heal, but slowly. You will not be splitting wood for a while, Beck said, binding the wound with strips of cloth. Worth it, Rhett managed through gritted teeth. She is safe. That is all that matters. They carried him back to the cabin, laid him in the big bed. Nola refused to leave his side, holding his uninjured hand, pressing her lips to his knuckles, whispering thank you over and over until the words lost meaning. That night, as Rhett slept fitfully under the influence of laudanum, Dalton and Beck sat with Nola by the fire. We have to deal with Blackwell, Dalton said. The marriage certificate may be forged, but it looks legitimate. We need to prove it is false before this goes to trial. How, Nola asked. I never signed it, but how do we prove that Beck leaned forward? Handwriting experts. They can analyze signatures to hire an expert from Denver. Bring him to hire an expert from Denver. Bring him to Pine Ridge. No, Nola said firmly. That money is mine, my escape fund, but I will spend it, not on an expert, on something better. She told them her plan. It was risky, possibly illegal, but it might work. The next morning, Nola went to town alone. Against the brothers' wishes over their protests, she walked into Pine Ridge with her head high and her resolve ironclad. She found Cornelius at the boarding house, sitting in the dining room with coffee and newspaper as if he were on holiday. Catherine, he said, standing, have you come to your senses? No. I have come to make you an offer. She sat down across from him uninvited. Leave. Take your forged certificate and your hired men and go back to Boston. Never contact me again, and I will not press charges. Cornelius laughed. Charges? For what I have done nothing wrong. You murdered Abigail Pierce and Constance Lowell. Your previous wards. I found the records in your study, the death certificates, the wills that conveniently left everything to you. And I am willing to testify to that, to tell the authorities what I know. His smile faded. You have no proof, just speculation from a confused girl. Nola leaned forward. I also have this. She placed a small leather notebook on the table. Your account ledger, the one you kept hidden in the false bottom of your desk drawer. The one that tracks every bribe you paid, every document you forged, every illegal transaction. I stole it the night I ran. Kept it as insurance. Cornelius's face went white. He reached for the notebook, but Nola was faster, snatching it back. This is enough to hang you, Cheryl, she said quietly. Fraud, forgery, embezzlement, possibly murder. Even if they cannot prove you killed Abigail and Constance, they can prove you stole from them. From me, from the church. The charges will follow you forever. You would not dare, he hissed. I made you, gave you a home when you had nothing. You made me a prisoner. And now I am offering you freedom. Walk away, disappear, or I turn this over to the authorities and you spend the rest of your life in prison, possibly at the end of a rope. They stared at each other across the table, years of abuse and fear hanging between them. But Nola was not the frightened girl who had fled Boston. She was harder now, sharper, forged by survival into something unbreakable. Cornelius saw it in her eyes, saw that she meant every word. Very well, he said finally, I will leave. But Catherine, know this. You have destroyed any chance at respectability. No decent society will accept you now. You will be a curiosity at best, a scandal at worst, living in sin with 3 men on a mountain, bearing bastard children. That is your future. Nola smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had found that exactly what she wanted and refused to apologize for it. That is my choice, she said. Mine, not yours, never yours again. She left him sitting there and walked back to the cabin. Back to the 3 men who had given her something Cornelius never could. Not just safety, but freedom. The freedom to choose. The freedom to be exactly who she wanted to be. That evening, the sheriff came to the cabin with news. Montgomery Thane had died from his wound without regaining consciousness. And Cornelius Blackwell had left town on the morning stage heading back to Denver and presumably on to Boston. The marriage certificate, Dalton asked. Sheriff Brennan held up the document. I had a chance to examine it closely. Several irregularities in the seal. The signature does not match other samples of Miss Hartwell's handwriting. I am declaring it void. Officially, Miss Hartwell is unmarried and free of any guardianship. He looked at the 3 brothers and Nola. Unofficially, I suggest you make this legal. Dalton, you and Nola should marry, properly, with witnesses and a license. That way, no one can ever challenge her status again. Circuit Judge Atticus Beaumont is in town for 2 more days, the sheriff continued. He can perform the ceremony. I suggest you take advantage of that. The wedding took place on February 27th in Pine Ridge's small church. The entire town attended, crowding the pews, curious and supportive in equal measure. Nola wore a simple dress borrowed from Charity Whitmore, not white, but a soft blue that matched her eyes. Her hair was loose, falling in waves past her shoulders. She carried a small bouquet of dried wildflowers, all that winter could provide. The 3 brothers stood at the altar, Dalton in the center, Rhett and Beck flanking him. All 3 wore their best clothes, clean shirts and pressed trousers, their chestnut hair neatly combed. They looked identical and magnificent and utterly devoted. Judge Beaumont was a practical man who had seen too much frontier life to be shocked by unconventional arrangements. He began the ceremony with traditional words, but when he reached the vows, he paused. Miss Hartwell, the law allows me to marry you to one man only. Dalton Brennan has agreed to be your legal husband. But I understand the reality of your situation differs from what the law recognizes. He looked at all 3 brothers. So I will ask you this. Do you 3 brothers promise to honor, protect, and cherish Magnolia Hartwell for as long as you all shall live? We do, they said in unison. And Miss Hartwell, do you take these 3 men in whatever capacity the law allows and your heart demands? Nola looked at Dalton, then Rhett, then Beck, saw in their identical amber eyes the same devotion, the same fierce protectiveness, the same love that had no need of legal definitions. I do, she said. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, Judge Beaumont declared, I pronounce you husband and wife. Dalton, you may kiss your bride. And gentlemen, you may also celebrate in whatever manner seems appropriate. Dalton kissed her first, acclaiming public and undeniable. Then Rhett, his kiss fierce despite his injured shoulder. Then Beck, his kiss gentle and sweet. The congregation erupted in applause. They held a reception at the town hall. The Pine Ridge women brought what food winter allowed. There was music and dancing and celebration. The Brennan brothers, once isolated by choice and tragedy, found themselves embraced by a community that had decided their unconventional marriage was no one's business but their own. Late that night back at the cabin, the 4 of them sat by the fire. Rhett's shoulder was healing well, though he winced when he moved too quickly. Beck had his arm around Nola, one hand resting protectively on her belly, where their child grew. Dalton stood by the window looking out at the snow-covered landscape he had called home for so many years. It is over, Nola said quietly. Monty, Cornelius, the threats, all of it. We are finally free. Not quite, Dalton said. Your 3 months are not up yet. You have until late March, until your birthday. You can still leave. Nola stood and crossed to him, took his face in her hands and made him look at her. I am not leaving, she said. Not in March, not ever. I choose this. Choose you. All 3 of you, for better or worse, in whatever way the law recognizes and in all the ways it does not. She pulled each brother close one by one, sealing her promise with kisses and touch and the fierce certainty of a woman who had finally found where she belonged. That night, they made love slowly, carefully mindful of Rhett's injury and Nola's pregnancy. But the tenderness made it more powerful, not less. Each touch was a vow, each whispered word a promise. Each moment of joining a recognition that they had built something rare and precious and worth fighting for. Afterward, lying in the darkness between 3 warm bodies, Nola thought of Lorelei, of the woman who had pioneered this path, who had shown these 3 men how to love without limits. She hoped Lorelei's spirit was at peace, hoped she understood that Nola was not replacing her, but continuing her legacy. Thank you, Nola whispered to the darkness. To the ghost who might or might not be listening. Thank you for showing them how. I will love them as fiercely as you did. I promise. Spring came slowly to the mountain. The snow melted in patches, revealing brown earth beneath. Green shoots pushed through the frozen ground. Birds returned to the pines. The world was renewing itself, coming back to life after the long death of winter. On the 15th of March, Nola turned 21. She was legally free of any guardianship, any control, save her own. The brothers threw her a birthday celebration, small, just the 4 of them, but filled with joy and laughter. Dalton gave her a deed to the land rewritten to include her name alongside theirs. Co-ownership. Partnership. Equality. Rhett gave her a handmade cradle of polished cedar carved with vines and flowers and small animals. The craftsmanship was exquisite, each detail perfect. It had taken him months of secret work, stealing hours when she was asleep or occupied elsewhere. Beck gave her a leather-bound journal, blank pages waiting to be filled. For our story, he said, so you can write it down, so our children will know how their parents found each other. Nola wept at each gift, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude for these three men who had given her everything she had never known she needed. That night, lying in bed with her hand on her growing belly, she wrote the first entry in her new journal. March 15th, 1878. Today I am 21 years old. Today I am truly free. Not free from bonds, but free to choose which bonds to accept. I choose these three men, these three brothers who are identical in body, but beautifully different in spirit. Dalton the leader, Rhett the protector, Beck the healer, and I am the center that holds them together as they are the foundation that holds me up. I do not know what our future holds, but I know we will face it together, as husband and wife, and husband and husband, as family, a love that refuses to be defined by anyone's rules but our own. The months passed in peaceful routine. Nola's belly swelled with new life. The brothers prepared for the birth with a mixture of terror and excitement. Beck studied every medical text he could obtain, determined not to lose another woman he loved. Rhett and Dalton built additions to the cabin, creating nursery space and expanding their home. Summer brought the hardest work of the year, planting, hunting, preserving food for the next winter. Nola worked alongside them as long as Beck allowed, which was not as long as she would have liked. He became increasingly protective as her due date approached. On October 14th, as the first snow of autumn began to fall, Nola's labor started. It began with a dull ache in her back that gradually intensified to waves of crushing pain. Beck timed the contractions with practiced efficiency. Dalton held her hands and talked her through breathing. Rhett paced outside like a caged animal, useless and terrified. 8 hours of labor, 8 hours of pain, beyond anything Nola had imagined. She screamed until her voice gave out, cursed the brothers in language that would have scandalized her Boston upbringing, swore she would never do this again. But when Beck finally said, push now one more time, she found strength she did not know she possessed, pushed with everything she had left, and felt the baby slide free in a rush of pressure and relief. The cry filled the cabin, loud and lusty and perfect. It is a boy, Beck said, his voice breaking. A healthy boy. He cleaned the baby quickly, cut the cord, and placed the infant on Nola's chest. She looked down at the tiny face, the thatch of chestnut hair, the eyes that would eventually turn amber like his father's. Benjamin, she whispered. His name is Benjamin. Benjamin Dalton, Rhett Beck Brennan, all three names, because he belongs to all of you. Dalton pressed his face into her hair, his massive shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Rhett came in from outside, saw the baby, and fell to his knees beside the bed. Beck sat on the other side, one hand on the baby, one hand on Nola, tears streaming down his face. We are a family, Beck said, truly a family now. And so they were. Three identical brothers, one fierce woman, one perfect child, bound together not by law or convention, but by choice and love, and the courage to build something society said was impossible. The years that followed brought 4 more children. Lorelei born 2 years after Benjamin, with Nola's blonde hair and quiet intelligence. Twin boys Marcus and Miles, born when Benjamin was 6, identical from birth, and as inseparable as their fathers. And finally Wyatt, born 3 years later, the baby who clung to his mother and showed signs of inheriting Beck's healing gifts. The cabin was expanded twice more, became a proper house with 6 bedrooms and a large kitchen and a parlor where the children did their lessons. The Brennan Ranch prospered. They hired help during busy seasons, became known throughout the territory as fair employers and good neighbors. Pine Ridge grew into a real town. The railroad came through in 1885, bringing new settlers and new opportunities. The Brennan family became pillars of the community. Dalton served on the town council. Beck became the unofficial doctor for anyone who needed help. Rhett ran a lumber mill that employed 15 men. Nola taught school 3 days a week, educating children whose parents remembered when she had arrived a frightened girl fleeing a monster. No one questioned their arrangement anymore. Or if they did, they kept it to themselves. The Brennan marriage was accepted as part of frontier life, as natural as the mountains and as enduring as the stones. On Christmas Eve, 1888, exactly 10 years after Nola had first stepped off the stagecoach in Pine Ridge, the family gathered on the porch of their home. Benjamin was 10 now, teaching his younger siblings how to track animals in the snow. Lorelei was 8, reading by firelight as always. The twins were 6, building snow forts and waging wars with icy ammunition. Wyatt was 3, clinging to Nola's skirts and watching his siblings with wide amber eyes. The 3 brothers stood with Nola, their arms around her, watching their children play. They were older now, 45 to Nola's 30, with silver threading through their chestnut hair and lines around their eyes from years of squinting into mountain sun. But they were still strong, still devoted, still the men who had offered her salvation and asked for nothing but the chance to love her. Nola's hand rested on her belly, where their 6th child grew. Another surprise, another blessing, another life to add to the family they had built against all odds. "Do you ever regret it?" Dalton asked quietly. "Choosing us instead of respectability?" Nola looked at him, then Rhett, then Beck. Saw in their identical faces the same question, the same vulnerability. Even after 10 years, they still worried she might wake up one day and realize she had made a mistake. "Not once," she said, "not for a single moment. You gave me something Boston never could. Not just safety or love, though you gave me both. You gave me the freedom to choose, to decide who I would be and how I would live. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." She pulled them close, these 3 men who were as much a part of her as her own heartbeat. "We built something beautiful here, something the world says should not exist. But it does exist. We exist. Our children exist. And we are proof that love does not need society's permission to be real." As darkness fell and the children came inside, hungry and cold and laughing, Nola thought of the girl she had been, the frightened 20-year-old who had run into the snow, desperate and alone, with only $23 and a prayer. That girl had found 3 men on a mountain, 3 brothers who had loved and lost and nearly broken under the weight of grief and guilt. Together, they had healed each other, had built a life that defied convention and exceeded every expectation. She thought of Mother Vivian, dead now these 4 years, who had given her the gift of choice disguised as necessity. She thought of Lorelei, whose spirit she still felt sometimes in the quiet moments, a presence that was blessing rather than haunting. She thought of Cornelius Blackwell, who had reportedly died of fever 2 years past his threat extinguished forever. And she thought of the baby growing inside her, another soul who would be born into this unconventional family and loved beyond measure. That night, after the children were asleep, the 4 adults sat by the fire. Nola opened the journal Beck had given her 10 years before now, filled with entries chronicling their decade together. She turned to a fresh page and began to write. December 24th, 1888. 10 years ago tonight, I stepped off a stagecoach into the unknown. I had run from a monster and found 3 men who showed me that love has no single shape, no correct form. Today we have 5 children with a 6th on the way. We have a home that rings with laughter. We have a community that accepts us. We have everything I never dared to dream of when I fled Boston in the darkness, certain I would die alone and afraid. Instead, I found life, found love, found freedom in the last place I expected it, in the arms of 3 identical strangers who looked at me like I was water in a desert. I would choose them again, every time, in every life. They are mine, and I am theirs, and our children are the proof that love needs no permission, save its own fierce beating heart. She closed the journal and looked at her 3 husbands. They were watching her with the same intensity they had shown that first night when she had stood naked and terrified before them, surrendering to the unknown. But she was not afraid anymore, had not been afraid for a very long time. "Come to bed," she said, "all of you. We have another decade to build, another lifetime to love each other." They came to her as they always had, together, united. 3 bodies that moved as one, 3 hearts that beat in synchrony with hers. And as they loved her in the darkness, as they had loved her for 10 years and would love her for all the years to come, Nola understood the truth her father had written in his Bible so long ago. Freedom is not the absence of bonds. Freedom is choosing which bonds to accept. She had chosen. And in choosing, she had found not just survival, but joy. Not just safety, but passion. Not just a home, but a family that was wholly, perfectly, impossibly hers. The snow fell outside, covering the mountain in white. The fire burned low. The The children slept peacefully in their rooms. And four adults lay tangled together in the bed they shared, breathing in unison, hearts beating as one. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new lives to nurture and protect. But tonight there was only this: peace, love, completeness. Nola Brennan, who had once been Magnolia Hartwell of Boston, closed her eyes and smiled. She had run into the wilderness seeking escape and found instead everything: